My name is Pooneh Ghoddoosi, and I work for the BBC for the past almost 12 years. I started doing journalism almost exactly 20 years ago when an earthquake happened on the southern part of the Caspian Sea, and about 50,000 people died. And at the time I went there, I was with a group of journalists with Wall Street Journal, which I worked, and the New York Times. And they arrived in the earthquake-hit area and interviewed the people and took pictures of, what happens in an earthquake. And the residents of that small town where the earthquake had happened were waiting for journalists to arrive, especially foreign journalists, because they were hoping that the interviews and the videos and the photographs of that earthquake would go to the world, and the rest of the people in the world would see it, and maybe they would help with some funding or from reconstruction and send some money and help the country. I remember how more grown-up journalists than me, because I was just a beginner with the Wall Street Journal at the time, but I remember how we went door to door and we spoke to the residents of houses and of villages who obviously didn't have houses or villages anymore. And the story got published on the top pages of New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, BBC, CNN, everything. At the time, 21 years ago, when that earthquake happened, the residents of those cities were sitting on the rubble on top of a pile of broken furniture and broken up homes, waiting for the journalists to arrive to tell their story to the rest of the world. Obviously, nobody in that kind of a city, it doesn't matter which country it is, it was in Iran at the time, but it doesn't matter. 21 years ago, in any country you would go, any earthquake that would happen, you would sit on the rubbles, hope that a journalist would come and interview you and show the pictures to the rest of the world. Now, we live in an extremely different world right now, because half the time the journalists take at least 5 days to get somewhere, 21 years ago. Now you have journalists or stringers or local journalists who can immediately upload pictures on the internet, and it can be on the top of any website within a few minutes. When I started journalism, the idea was that the journalist knows how to tell a story, the reporter knows how to interview people, and that is the version of the story that will be told. 20 years later, that is not the case anymore. What we teach in journalism school right now, hopefully around the world, is that whatever you think you know, whatever story you think you've learned and you want to tell, there is at least one person who knows it better than you do, who has seen it from a closer point of view than you have, and who can tell that story in a better way than you can. Because obviously, let's face it, the famous big shot journalists and TV presenters of this world are not that many. You don't want to wait for Cristiano Manpour or Roger Simpson or anyone else who's really big shot and famous to arrive there and interview you. And for them, from their Western point of view or from their Eastern point of view, to tell the story like they see it. The important story is now to tell the story like it is happening. There is no more government filtration in many countries. There is no more the version of the story that they want you to hear. And that is only because of the power of audience participation. And now all journalists respect the audience as knowing the story as much as you do, or as being able to tell the story in a different way, if not a better way or a worse way, but in a very exciting and a new way all the time. And that is only because of the power of social media. These days, you don't have to wait for somebody to come and interview you and ask your opinion. You are allowed, or encouraged in some countries even, to write your own blog, say your own opinion, put on Facebook whether you like or don't like your president, or whether you think the parliamentary elections were fair or unfair. And hopefully you won't get arrested for it in some countries. And you can also send your pictures, send your videos to the big shot news agencies, to Reuters, to ANSA, to BBC, to CNN. And you can sit there, watch the TV in that evening, and if your video footage or your photograph or your eyewitness account is good enough, or verifiable, more importantly, you can sit at home, watch TV on BBC and CNN, and expect your piece of video that you sent earlier to be shown on TV to the millions, 180 million other audience around the world. And that, again, is only the power of social media. Now, we can all take advantage of that. We can all take disadvantage of that, as we do. You can send a hoax news story to someone. You can send a political advertisement instead of a true story. Or when a demonstration is happening somewhere in the world and you're the government that doesn't want it to happen, like Tunisia or Egypt or Iran or many other countries where it's happening now, like Yemen and Syria. You can arrest the people who are on the street with their mobile phones standing in the middle of a demonstration going like this, like many of you are doing today, like all of these little cameras that I see in this room. But the most important part of it is that one version of that story, or 200 versions, is still going to be broadcast. The man who set himself on fire in Syria or in Tunisia, or the people who demonstrated, or the wild names from Egypt, will still be there. There is one person, or there is a million people around the world who will still do that. And people need to be trained and made aware of the effect of that. So if you're sitting in a conference hall like this and you're playing with your Facebook while I'm making my very important presentation, you are free to take a clip of anything, send it to your friends and say, I'm at this really boring speech right now. And you are free to make a point of a sentence of something interesting that you might hear. For example, if I say a joke in the middle of it, to your friends. And you are free to send this to the BBC and to the CNN and to anyone else, your own news agencies. I know you have about 40 different TV channels in Armenia. And I don't think you have 40,000 TV producers and TV journalists who are on the streets filming everything and interviewing people all the time. So the power is to the people right now to send their videos, to send their comments. If you have an eyewitness account, to tell your story. And that has made journalism a lot richer and more powerful. Now, some of my colleagues do not agree with me at all because they think they are threatening journalism and they're making us fall out of business. And who needs a journalist with 20 years of experience in journalism, who's traveled around the world, who speaks 5 languages, when I can say the story? I'm in this room myself. I know what's happening. I don't need someone else to tell me. But I think that's a great opportunity because you can listen to my story, you can listen to his story, you can listen to her story, and as a people, you can make your own judgment, which again is a very scary thing and a very powerful thing to do. These days you can turn on your TV, you can look at CNN, you can look at BBC, you can look at Russia News, Russia Today, you can look at France 24, you can look at Armenian local TV, you can look at Iranian state TV or Egyptian state TV. And then you can compare all of this with the blogs you see, with the Facebook comments you see, with the videos you see on YouTube, with the stories of eyewitness accounts you hear from around the world. And then you can sit there and think for 2 minutes if you have the time or the inclination and think, okay, what is really happening? So you compare 5 different stories, 5 different versions of the stories, and then you decide. That has made a huge difference to journalism because 177 million people listen to BBC around the world and 16 million people use our online website. And these people are not only audiences anymore. These people are cooperating with the BBC to send us material and tell us their version of the story, whether it is Afghanistan or Iraq or Egypt or Armenia. Somebody was just telling me, I can't believe the story of a woman who took the wire and disconnected the internet from the whole country was the headline in the BBC for a day. Who cares? We don't care, but if somebody sends us a very interesting story with a very funny picture of an old woman pulling out a huge cable and cutting it, we love it. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We play it on the BBC because we don't have a reporter standing in the middle of some garbage dump waiting for some old woman to take out the wire and disconnect the internet. We don't have that many journalists. We can't pay that many journalists to do that anymore. So if even you send a video of the old woman with the scissors cutting the fiber optics, we'll be very happy. We will be very excited to receive that. However, yeah, with the teeth or with the scissors, I have no idea.
We had an internet by that time.
I know. You could have sent it with your mobile phone. But the powerful point is that we have 33 different languages on the BBC. And on our website you see material coming from all over the world. But why should BBC bother with that kind of material? Is it good enough? Is it verifiable? Is it believable? And will it make our material any better? We're the BBC, we know everything. We can broadcast everything ourselves, can't we? But social media is really changing the way journalism works. And it's making it a lot better. And my PowerPoint presentation is going faster than me on its own without me touching it. If everybody has a Facebook account, and if everybody has access to YouTube, they can send you their stories. This is BBC Urdu website. You have a Have Your Say page on all of the websites on the BBC and all of the channels. This is the Portuguese, Brazilian, Spanish BBC Mundo website. This is another comment of the BBC Persian stories on people just sending you stories. They can be famous people. They can be Nobel Prize winners. They can be journalists from another organization. They can be university students. They can be anyone who's just curious enough to be on the street at the right time, at the right place. But we in the BBC, although we really love receiving all of this, it makes our job a lot harder as well, because we have a team of at least 50 people. We call it the Ugc Hub. And it was designed, it means user-generated content hub. It was designed exactly after the London bombings in 7/7. And that's when people realized if we are receiving 1 million videos of the tube, the underground bombings, people are sending us pictures from inside the wagon, from under the tunnel, where the explosion has just happened. They're sending us pictures, and we cannot be sure if this is true or not, if this is a real story or not, or if the pictures we're receiving are correct or not. So we set up this media hub that does that for us. We have experts from around the world. We have people who speak the language, who know how it works, to verify that, to sometimes find the person on YouTube and say, where did you get that video? I will show you some very quick pieces of information and video. And I'm sorry if some of them are a little bit horrifying and upsetting. This one is from the demonstrations 2 years ago after the Iranian election, where there was protest happening on the street. We got news of the demonstration where a police car ran over one of the protesters and the protester was killed. Obviously, with the BBC, you don't want to say something you hear before you verify it. Then we received a video here, the one you see Sunday, December 27th. I will play it for you. Prepare yourself, because it's a little bit disconcerting. We couldn't play this. We received it on YouTube, and somebody emailed it for us, saying, I was in the Valias Square when this happened. I have this video. We watched it, we studied it, we couldn't broadcast it because we weren't exactly sure what was happening. As you see, the picture is very shaky. We received 2 more footages, which you see following this one. After a slide on the screen, the next video will come, and then the next video will come. And then when we had 3 different versions of the same event happening from 3 different mobile phones, from 3 different people who were standing at the 3 different corners of that square, only then we were sure enough that this event really happened. We broadcast it on the BBC, and we got the security forces in Iran in serious trouble because they were denying it. And when it was broadcast, the parliament had to actually take the security forces and question them. I invite you to watch this, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit chaotic and unhappy. a mobile picture is not excellent TV quality or high definition. But sometimes the story is so strong that the quality really doesn't matter. Second video we received. They're shouting, somebody ran over him with the police car. A man injured is saying, the car ran over me, it was the police. And that's the third video from a third person. I'm sorry for those really sad pictures, but you can see what I mean. Who can deny that that story happened? When you have a video from 3 different angles from the same story, you can see what car it is, you can see who's driving it, and it's very difficult to deny that and say that didn't happen. We had a similar story in Egypt at the time the riots were happening there. We had the luck of having BBC journalists in Egypt because we don't have any BBC journalists in Iran. They're not allowed to work. But this one in Egypt was good because we received reports and the video footage sent to us from Egypt about shooting happening in a school. And the government said the protesters were shooting at the people from inside the building of a school. Afterwards, we sent a BBC reporter into that school who went and peek at the footage. And he made a report on BBC Arabic TV. It doesn't matter if you don't understand the language, he's just saying, I decided to go and find out what happened in that footage. So he goes to visit that school a few weeks after the protest.
بعض المواد التي التقطوها عبر الهواتف النقالة لما حدث.
And people are showing him the video footage they took on their mobile phone. That's the shooting happening. That's what we showed on BBC Arabic.
بعد انتهاء الاشتباكات لم يتوقف السكان عن التصوير. صعد بعضهم إلى المدرسة موقع الحادث لمزيد من اللقطات. وبينما كان البعض يقوم بالتصوير كان البعض الآخر يجمع مخلفات المعركة.
And these are the bullets.
التي وصلت إلى بعض الشقق المحيطة.
So as you can see, it shows that if you have the power and the time to verify it, you have a great story. And if you have the person to actually go on top of the video of the window of the school where the man was filming, then you can really be sure that the man was standing in that window and he was filming something for you. And that is not something a BBC journalist can do in Syria, in Yemen, in Tunisia, in Egypt sometimes, and definitely in Iran. So social media is integral to journalism these days. It's making our life very difficult, but it's making journalism very exciting as well. And I really hope and expect everyone to feel the responsibility to tell their own story. Because, as I've learned recently, as a journalist, there's always someone who knows more about that story than you do. Thank you very much. I'll take questions if you have any.